as usual, I guess many of you already know what I'm going to talk about this morning. It's a topic that very much close to my heart for the last few years. It's also something I find it always sometimes difficult to talk about because it's extremely emotional sometimes for the scale of it and for the development of it. And so I just want to quickly check the room. How many of you have heard about the concept of scamming compound or like forced criminality? Great, this is amazing. Last year, when I do the same thing, I think only half of the room have heard about the term. But I think in 1 year, now all of us, at least we understand what's going on. So today, my talk is going to be about the trend and also an analysis about what's going on, and also finally a bit of a strategies about what our Asian regions can do about this type of new emerging crime. So can I have the next slide, please? Thank you so much, Joe. The next one as well, the first one, the trend. So I don't want to go into the detail again to explain what is forced criminality or scamming compound. I think many of you have known people being trafficked into doing these criminal activities, forced to do scam. And in 1 year, what we are seeing is that some very concerning trend is happening. So when we have the next one, we are seeing just some examples in different countries. For example, in Cambodia, we are seeing that the compounds, even though there were some raids before, but now they are coming back in full force. There were some Chinese governments, Cambodian governments going to compounds and bring out lots of victims and criminals. But now when you are visiting those places, you are seeing it's just bubbling, it's lots of shops around it. And you are also hearing, for example, survivors are telling us that they are still proliferating in different locations, growing up, new buildings, building up day-to-day basis. And then we are also seeing, not just seeing, for example, Sihanouk Vale, which is the major place that people talk about, but also in other locations. So for example, in Bavet, this is like the kind of bordering area with Vietnam. You can actually literally see that from the satellite image again, like little boxes. And then, not just in Cambodia, but for example, in Myanmar, this is one of the very notorious compound called the KK compound. From the satellite image, you can see 2022, it's just a kind of like 1/3 of area, then gradually it's expanding. And by the way, this satellite image is not even the latest updated. It's just on Google Map, July 2024. But in reality, it might have already been even expanding more than that. And some of the very notorious stakeholders are still there in the region. So what we are seeing, it's a crime that's really kind of out of control. Next slide. And even, for example, in areas like Laos, we are seeing not just that criminals are doing this work, but also we need to understand in the last few months, the Chinese government has been quite strong in terms of combating this. They are actually bringing out thousands and thousands of Chinese citizens from Southeast Asia. So what it means is not like compound stopping what they are doing, but the opposite. So since Chinese government is very tough on this, now most of the criminal compounds, they understand they cannot traffic Chinese victims in, or they cannot scam Chinese citizens in China. So they are trying to shift away their business ideas to other nationalities. In fact, I was in Cambodia last year, and I happened to meet some people who basically act a bit like real estate agencies. They are very much upfront and saying, looks like you speak good English. So that means you might be able to do very successful scam. They didn't know who I am, so they were like suggesting, actually everybody who's in that region might be trying to enter in this business. So we are seeing a very worrying trend that the criminals are now trying to go even more global. It was previously a bit more regional, but now going more and more global. And then we are also seeing, for example, in Laos, there was this area called the Golden Triangle Special Economic Zone that we have this criminal on the picture, Zhao Wei, who's already sanctioned by the US and other countries. So in this special economic zone, what happened is that it's almost like its own kingdom. So the Laos government basically don't have any kind of real ability to govern this area, but it's already kind of lended for 99 years lease to Zhao Wei in his company. So survivors coming out from the Laos compound are saying that they are not allowed to scam plus 86. What does plus 86 mean? This is the phone call of China. So that means like in this area, yes, they are doing scam, but they are not scamming Chinese citizens, they are scamming all the other rest of the world because they understand that's the rule in here. Also, we heard about all this kind of very violent situation in the scamming compounds. But in this area, specifically, they are saying we don't want to see murder, we don't want to see death, we don't want to see extreme violence. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but it just means the compounds are finding a way to, for example, torture you, but without leaving the marks on your body. And scam is basically allowed, it's still continuing in this entire area. And not just that, but outside of special economic zones, even in the capital of Laos, we are also seeing new compounds popping up. Basically on, for example, some of the Telegram groups that criminals exchanging intelligence and information, they are saying about all new information on a daily basis. And UAE even, I mean, we're talking about Asia, but actually even this is part of a larger Asia. So we are seeing compounds, let's say in Dubai, in Ajman, in multiple locations, and again, like those larger infrastructures and thousands of people. So this is one of the pictures that previously, just a few weeks ago, there was some raid and police will bring out lots of victims and criminals that sometimes it's also a bit hard to immediately differentiate who they are. So the whole idea is, this is such a huge thing and we are seeing it popping up. I'm just giving some example of those locations, but in fact, actually a few weeks ago, there were also some reports just in here in Bali about 100 Taiwanese criminals being found in one of the buildings in Bali running scam. So this is how widely spread it is in multiple locations. And if you look at criminals' computers or even like victims' computers in those scamming operations, you might see they use applications like that. So what it is that it allows you to chat with multiple victims at the same time. You have one computer, you chat with multiple WhatsApp account, multiple Telegram account, and there's even the built-in translation function. So you could be typing in Chinese and it goes to Spanish, or you could be typing in English, it just straight away translate to German, for example. Built-in translation function. I just realized I think the mic has some change, it becomes louder, thank you. And the next one, please. So a little bit of analysis. What we are seeing is that the scam operation becomes much more specialized. It's like a global supply chain. So if you imagine like a car supply chain, you will see people who are like harvesting the metal, who are like assembling the lights, who are building different parts. This is exactly what happened with the scam supply chain. You see people who are specialized, let's say, in like producing the kind of scam scripts. So today maybe it's about pig butchering, tomorrow it's about how to do sport, gambling scam, another day it's extortion, another day government authorities calling you. So the scripts can be, unlimited, and there are people who specialize in producing those scripts. Then you also have, for example, money laundering. People who specializing in laundering those monies. Then you also have, let's say, coding team who are like building up the systems. I just show you the pictures of how they chat with multiple victims at the same time. So how can we improve that system to make it better? Criminals are hiring the best talents around the world to do that. So it's very much specialized. And it's very difficult to even call it a very homogeneous picture, because you might have like larger stakeholders who are like shareholder into multiple scam companies. You might also have small, opportunistic, small-time criminal gangs just, assembling a 10-people team and trying to enter this business. So it's extremely diverse and extremely large. And another thing we realize is that the victim profile and criminal profile is extremely complex. So, of course, from my background and from all of us here, we care about stopping human trafficking, and that's exactly how I entered. I met some victims, I met some survivors, and they tell me the stories that they didn't consent and didn't know this is scam, and therefore they entered, but then they realize this is a scam and they try to leave very, very, whatever they can. However, in the last 1 year, we have also realized the profile of people who are inside is extremely layered. So for example, you might have a traditional criminal who entered as a fraudster, who happy to be a fraudster, who continue to be a fraudster, continue their criminal journey. That's a traditional case. And you also may be having, for example, Salam's case. Salam is one of our HRC's team member, and he's also a survivor leader himself. So his case, he didn't know this is a scamming compound. He just entered, he saw it's a good paid job, and then happens to be, unfortunately, scam. However, you also have the other two type. So for example, some people entered as a criminal. They say, yes, I want to do fraud, I want to be a fraudster, I want to do scam. However, I didn't know they will beat me up. I didn't know that they will, hold all my salaries. I didn't consent to that, and therefore, at the end of the day, when I tried to leave, the compound is saying, no, you cannot leave. So this is the type that basically they enter as a kind of a criminal, but also at the same time becoming victims of forced labor or victims of indentured servitude. Then we also have another one, which is people who entered unknowingly, actually victims of human trafficking, but then realize, I can actually earn a good commission fee here, and since it's so difficult for somebody else to come and rescue me, and so why not I just continue this criminal journey and jump on the ladder? So unfortunately, we are also seeing some people who shifting their identities and becoming willing criminals as well, and who are willing to stay in the compound even when they have opportunities to leave. So at least we are seeing these four type of individuals. Then now we are also seeing, just to confirm what we are saying about people who willingly joined, you can see on some of the Telegram channels, which I also mentioned a bit of this last year, the Telegram channels are giving you lots of intelligence. So for example here, even if you cannot read the Chinese, you can see those flags. They are recruiting people who speak Korean, who speak Russian, who speak other languages that can help them to scan those areas. So they are openly recruiting those people. And guess what? Yes, there are lots of people who will respond and trying to enter the compound like that way. On the other side, we might also see individuals advertising themselves, saying that they would like to join this compound scam business. Sometimes they even mention that they are accepting confinement as a working condition. So what it means is that they are voluntarily given up their freedom of movements and willing to join a compound that will lock them up for 1 year. Of course, in that case, we still view them as a victims of forced labor. However, you are just seeing that dynamic is extremely layered and complex. It's not just like your usual black and white, but actually you have lots of vulnerabilities involved in that case. So what are we talking about here? It's a $3 trillion industry. And this is a number that just came out a few months ago by the Interpol chief. Also, the UNODC is talking about one of the Southeast Asian countries that this scamming compound and human trafficking is taking up around half of its country GDP. So the scale is just unimaginable. And I want to just discuss a little bit, take a pause here. What does 3 trillion actually mean? So if you look at the scale, then you're seeing, for example, the global illicit drug trafficking. We are talking about around $1 trillion. And by the way, this is one of the highest number I'm searching because, of course, there's lots of different estimation. $1 trillion US. Then if you look at most of the estimations, again, like a higher end on, say, like sex trafficking or forced labor, we are talking about hundreds of billion scale. But now, just one single type of criminal activities, we are talking about 3 trillion. What does that even mean? The other day I was just being reminded, so if you're thinking about 1 million seconds, that's 11 days. But if you're thinking about 1 billion seconds, that's 31 years. So I'm just kind of playing with a scale, like a trillion and billion is an extremely different scale we're talking about. And by the way, the global economy, we're talking about around $100 trillion a year. So we are saying like about 1% or like more than 1% of the global economy now is generated by these kind of criminal activities. It's extremely alarming. And so, by the way, I just realized I cannot actually see the slide, so you can see like I'm peeking through this side here. But so when it comes to, let's say, the Central America examples, unfortunately, I think we all know that Central America has been troubled with illicit drug trafficking for many years, actually for 4 decades. And so what it means, like once you have transnational organized crime, it's something that very difficult for you to cut the tie, because it just attracts all different kind of criminal activities all together, including human trafficking. And so the point is that we need to act before it's too late. Right now, the forced criminality is just starting in Asia for let's say like less than 5 years. So it's still possible for us to really combat it. However, if you continue it for too long, we don't know what will happen. Like in the future, like the eruption of stabilities, all the troubles in society. Imagine like the young generations searching for job and just looking at the scam as the next job opportunity. These are all extremely problematic. So what is it? It's not just about human trafficking crisis. It's actually a national security crisis. And here, by national, I'm talking about national in terms of Indonesia, in terms of Cambodia, in terms of the US, in terms of all the countries that's affected. Either you have compounds in your country, or your citizens being trafficked there, or your citizens losing money to this industry. Then it's also a transnational organized crime issue. It's also organized cyber fraud, or if you want to talk it, a kind of intricacy between human trafficking and money laundering in a scale that we have never seen before. Like a few months ago, again, there was one of the largest Singapore's money laundering case. If you have seen the news, can you raise your hand? Have you seen the news in Singapore's largest money laundering case? Yeah. Where is those money coming from? The headline is just about money laundering, but the money has to come from somewhere. And if you look at the criminal profiles, many of them actually have some business in Cambodia that's related to scam. So we are seeing a scale of a crime that's never before. So the strategy. Today, we are in Asia, and many of us are in the NGO sectors. So I try very hard to tailor my message more towards us, that's relevant to us. So we'll talk about protection, prevention, partnership, and the prosecution. So the first one, protection. What can we do? Right now, I guess, still, it's only a handful of NGOs that's trying to take care of this issue. And it's understandable, because most of the NGOs, you might have your 5-year strategy, you might have your 10-year strategy that didn't include forced criminality, didn't include scamming compound. But my message is, we actually need you. Because this issue is so huge that a handful of NGOs really will not be able to address this. That if there's a capacity, if there are ability, we will welcome a lot that more NGOs and more different allies joining this fight together. So for example, one of the first things is that we need repatriation of the survivors. And here we are talking about repatriation of quite unique profile sometimes. Like traditionally, we look at, let's say, Cambodia as a trafficking origin country. Unfortunately, people being exploited, let's say, in other regions. However, now we are seeing certain countries that traditionally are origin countries now become destination country, or vice versa. So there's a lot of repatriation routes that's not necessarily familiar by many people. And that process needs a lot of facilitation. So repatriation of the survivors, how to take care of their costs in the process. Sometimes they have medical needs. A few months ago, my team and I were just trying to sort out one of the flights to make sure that the seats can be flattened, because one of the survivor need to be cannot sit in the flight, but has to be going with a bed. So those kind of communications, it will be really helpful for more people to try to help these. Then we also need to raise awareness with the embassies. As we mentioned, that the trafficking profile is shifting, and a lot of embassies are really not prepared for that. If you talk to them, hey, like we are stuck in the compound, they're like, okay, we have never heard about that, or this is your problem, or maybe you just have a problem with your employers. So the communication with embassies and the education with embassies, the awareness raising with embassies is also another very important element. Then also, here we are in Asia, and to be honest, even though I talk about this is becoming global, but still Asia is the main region that we are troubled with this issue. Compound mapping and documenting. Like right now, you are seeing a lot of people, maybe from the US, maybe from Germany, from other places, trying to document this issue. But actually, here we are. We might know the best. If you go around, let's say to some region, and you see there's some people coming in and out, and you actually ask around the vendors around, they may actually tell you, yeah, something dodgy, something weird is happening there. So the compound mapping and documenting to collect the information, it's extremely helpful because all the outsiders, they might only be able to get the delayed information. So for example, when I start working on this issue now, I talked with another Taiwanese friend of mine who used to live in Cambodia many years ago. And she was like, oh yeah, actually, we used to have some Chinese men who come into my shop, my store, crying and asking for help. I didn't know what it is about, but now you mentioned this, I connect the dots. Maybe it was already scamming compound, but just it was not in the scale that we are seeing today. So what I'm saying is, if you are in the front line, if you are in the region, for sure you can get intelligence that people outside didn't know yet. It's just about like understanding that connection. And, oh, sorry. Yeah, so I think we have the slide. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, so is this the next one? Can we go? Yeah, great, thank you. So another one on persecution. Sorry, can we go back a slide before? Yes, so Awe's trafficking routes. So Awe is another survivor that we supported. He was being exploited in Cambodia, but then his trafficker was trying to move him to Myanmar. Cambodia and Myanmar are not connecting to each other, so how do you do that? You have to pass either through Thailand or through Laos. In his case, they tried to bring him through Thailand. So he actually mapped out all the locations he has been through, and at the end of the day, he actually jumped the car and tried to save himself. So those locations he has passed by, it will not be one-off. He's for sure not the only one who has been, taken through these routes. There are other people, and he actually also brought other police afterwards to look at these routes. But again, my message is, we are locally here. That means a lot of intelligence, it could be understood from here, not from outside. The next slide. So on the persecution part, that's another element I think we can really do very well. So for example, linking the survivor with the right law enforcement to share the intelligence. Recently, something made me feel extremely happy and proud is that Salam, our survivor leader at HRC, he was invited to go to Germany to provide a 3-day hearing, a very detailed court hearing, to share the testimonies of what he has been through in a compound, 3 different compounds, 4 different companies, and the kind of scam activities, what kind of app they use, what kind of VPN sharing you use, what kind of management styles they have, to share all this intelligence with law enforcement bodies. And I think we talk about worker centers, survivor centers, but a lot of the time we haven't even think how much about how survivors can also be the experts in terms of understanding a certain type of modus operandi of a certain kind of activity. So for example, in that case, Salam actually understands the most of how scam is made. In a sense, it's not voluntary, but he does understand because of what he has been through. So if we are able to pair in survivor with law enforcement, we are able to speed up this fight much faster. Not through me, not through other people who are, second there, because we have never been actually in the compound, but people who are there, who understands how it's made. Then we can also collect more evidence about what enablers surrounding elements. So if you want to have a compound that's holding, let's say, 4,000 people inside, you have to have the construction company that actually built that compound. You have to have the internet company that's providing the speedy internet there. You have to have even, for example, food and KTV, massage suits, or even kind of surrounding shop that's around the area. Who are the enablers locally in that area? I'm not even talking about the more kind of difficult things, like for example briberies or other kind of local police station. I'm just talking about the enablers that's allowing the compound to operate. So this information, again, we need people to collect and to share to the right stakeholders. And also around advising and advocating for revising the laws on fraud and scam. So what I mean is, unfortunately, fraud and scam is being seen as some kind of a very minor crime traditionally. Like if you have, let's say, for example, stabs or like hurting other people, that definitely is a serious crime. But scam traditionally is being seen as something very minor and very frequent. So if you go to the police and reporting you being scammed, most likely they will not do anything. And in some countries' case, even if they are able to identify the criminal, they might only just sentence that, they say, for example, 6 months, 1 year, and even have the opportunity to bail. That means you can just pay and you never need to go to the jail. So the law is not really ready for addressing scam, and that has a consequence, because that means the criminals can run this as a business and they can try to recruit more people and don't need to worry that much about the potential harm and risk. And also sometimes what happens is that even if the law says, yes, we'll put you in jail and you can bail, the message is that criminals can just pay and they can get off the hook very easily. But what we need is even more than that. What we need is, for example, asset forfeiture. That means, okay, if the criminal earned his money and invested it, let's say buying houses and cars, the police should have the ability to confiscate those properties, those assets, and make them into money compensating the victims. But most of the law nowadays in Asian region are not ready for that. So that's another element for persecutions, where the areas that we can try to work harder. So just on this diagram to talk about, because we are talking about transnational organized crime, it's organized. So it's not just 1 or 2 person doing this. It's entire criminal industry trying to do this. So they are always interacting with the legal business, like what I said. For example, construction company, for example, internet company, because you need those normal infrastructures to be able to operate your criminal activities. So just to emphasize how many legal business, even for example banks, they might be actually part of this process, but just not necessarily 100% aware of it. And prevention. So when it comes to NGOs, it can also be supporting, influencing the key government stakeholder. So I say that in a sense, understanding how things work here. I'm from Taiwan originally, and in Taiwan, I have my Facebook friends who are government officials who might be sitting in important positions, and we might be able to chat more like a friend, not necessarily just work colleagues. And I'm very, very sure many of you have that kind of a relationship with your different stakeholders outside the NGO sectors. You might be able to influence the society in a way that you never imagined. Yesterday, I was just having some chat with some friends talking about certain small NGOs, but could be super, super impactful because they have the right channel, the right connection. So I believe that a lot of Asian governments, unfortunately, they are not 100% aware of the consequence that we are talking about here. That half of the GDPs could be contributing to these criminal activities. What does it mean 10 years down the line? It will mean more violence, it will mean generations of loss, it will mean destabilized. And by the way, the criminals are not necessarily even the national of the country, but it's criminals from outside that's building up compounds in those areas. So even if the government is not accepting to a certain degree, what happened in the next few years, it's something that's very difficult to know. So my point is, all of us here, we are able to influence the key stakeholders around us, and just sharing that message and just repeating that they'll understand how serious it is. And then we can also, for example, supporting to understand how the money flows. For example, if you have heard about Hui Wang, can you raise your hand? Hui Wang. Hui Wang, it's one of the biggest money kind of transferring tool or like brand in Cambodia, and actually also outside Cambodia. So recently there are also some news and investigation about how Hui Wang become one of the major facilitators in money laundering, particularly money laundering for this type of criminal activity. Again, that for an outsider, that it could be extremely difficult because Hui Wang doesn't exist in US or UK, but it's actually on the street of Cambodia. If you just drive on the road, you can actually see them visibly. So understand how the money is moving between different areas and between how criminals with other enterprise, that could also be very helpful because ultimately all this is driven by money. If we are able to cut the tide of money, then we are able to stop the criminal. Then we can also support monitoring the trend. Again, like the story I just mentioned, the Chinese man crying in the shop, that was several years ago. And what is the trend going? Again, like we are here. We might be able to monitor it in a much faster and quicker way. So just also to share a bit about HRC's initiative. We recently started engaging with UNODC, United Nations Office of Crime and Drug. The purpose is trying to put organized fraud, this type of criminality, into another, to be identified as another transnational organized crime. Because traditionally, if we look at UNTOC, which is the convention to define transnational organized crime, we talk about, for example, trafficking in person, migrant smuggling, and trafficking in firearms. So, for example, when it comes to definition of human trafficking, one of the key documents is the Prelima Protocol. The protocol is actually supplementing to this convention. So if you look at that, fraud or scam, it's never mentioned because yes, 20 years ago it was not a major issue, but nowadays we are seeing organized fraud as a major criminal activity. So we are trying to say, hey, it's not enough just saying firearm, but we have to say that organized fraud, it's also another kind of transnational organized crime. So the final part about partnership, how can Asian NGOs do to help with bridging partnership? And I think it's actually the point also appear in many of your previous slides. So first of all, we can work with international NGOs because it's an issue that's extremely international. So far, HRC, we have supported, for example, survivors from Ethiopia, Uganda, Kenya, some people from Latin America, Southeast Asia. So it's extremely international. Even I have communicated with 2 American victims who are US citizens. So we are able to communicate, and it might be actually a learning curve for us to be able to communicate and bridging partnership with NGOs that we haven't traditionally been working together with. And then we also need to identify and work with trustworthy law enforcement bodies. And again, this is an extremely difficult task, but I believe that all of us here will have the wisdom to identify and to be able to work the right law enforcement bodies. Then also the collective actions and to distribute the risk. So in 2021, I saw some very courageous act that lots of NGOs in Cambodia are coming together and requesting the government to take the issue much more seriously. And there was a kind of petition. So many of the names were named together, which is much safer and better for the NGO instead of one of them coming out and address this crime. So the kind of collective action. So again, to emphasize the global scale of it, we are talking about sometimes the kingpin can be in country A, and the victims of forced labor could be from country B, and operation site is actually in country C, scam victims from country E, and the money laundering country F. So I'm just giving a short example, but you understand what I mean? Like it could be even more international than that. And the money is flowing from the scam victims that all the way to the kingpin, sometimes slightly to the money laundering locations, but some really actually benefit the countries that the scamming compounds are located. So if you want to start an investigation, who should start? Should we talk about country A starting and then try to kind of communicate with all the rest of the country? It's very difficult and it's extremely complex. It's different from the traditional form of bilateral collaboration. We are talking about multiple countries coming together. So the whole mindset needs shifting, and And also we are fighting against the time because criminals are very, very fast. And every single day we are still seeing this crime is being expanding more and more. So finally, I want to leave at least some time for questions. We have published several briefings in the last few years, including the very beginning we mapped the cyber scam, cyber slavery. That was in 2022. And at that time, we did a very, very conservative estimation of numbers of victims. We were only saying 50,000, super conservative. But nowadays, of course, the UN report, even the United States Institute of Peace, USIP report, are talking about hundreds of thousands. And still, many people, we are feeling this is an underestimation. It could be much higher than that. We also publish briefings around how to respond to victims in forced labor and talking about the ideas of non-punishment principle. So when somebody is a victim of forced labor and being forced to do certain act, they should not be punished by that. So they should not be punished by, for example, doing scam. And we also published a briefing talking about global sanctions. So, for example, other countries, they are not in the Asian region, but still want to address this issue. What can they do? They can use, for example, sanction tools to address this. And in the next few months, you are still seeing more documents coming from us. For example, talking a little bit more about Laos and Dubai and those compounds, or for example, addressing more in detail about how criminals communicating with each other, like using Telegram groups. So, like what I said in the beginning, this is a topic I find it sometimes overwhelming because the scale of it is just so huge. And we are fighting against the time, and criminals are already knowing how to use AI, how to use the best of technology, but we are still here, sometimes being very slow and trying to figure out a way to work together. So I feel that kind of emergency, it's almost like it's not a development kind of issue, but it's a humanitarian crisis, like when you have an earthquake, when you have a famine, you need to act quickly. For me, it's a bit like that. But also at the same time, I feel quite hopeful because I'm a person who is very optimistic, and I'm seeing how our society, moving from the last 100+ years, that it used to be full of issues, let's say kind of a racial inequality, gender inequality, but we are able to move all the way to today. So we have solved some like really major global issues, and I believe this is another major issue that in, let's say, 10 years, 20 years, we might be able to look at our children and they will be saying, oh yeah, were you there when the whole scamming issue was just popping out? And we will be able to say, yes, we were there, and we tried very, very hard to stop it, and we did. We did some amazing job. Therefore, the world is still in a way that's still with orders and not collapsing with all these issues. So my final message is thank you so much for being all here, and I'm sure that we will see each other continue to fight this, and please reach out. I'm always very, very happy to find collaborations together. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mina. It was always really great to learn from you. We have a few questions. We have some time. The first question, how does this look from a legal perspective, and especially in the countries where the scamming cases are being booked or are taking place? Is there any need for new law or new legislation, for example, in countries like Cambodia?
Yeah, so I think, okay, for countries, by the way, I always try to put this because I know this is also recorded. I understand like different governments still looking at the issue with different lens. Some of them are still at the stage of denial, for example, saying that this is not scam or this is not trafficking. Some countries are taking it more directly, recognizing what it is. I've also recognized that there's a lot of resistance in the kind of, I guess, Asian way of saving face, that you don't want to be seen as not doing enough. You want to be always seen as the best. So I just want to acknowledge all these elements because it means it's not necessarily always easy for us to kind of push the government to go to the same direction that we would love to. When it comes to like the legal kind of a reform, at the moment in areas that having scamming compounds, we are not seeing that much, to be honest. For example, the areas I mentioned, Cambodia, Myanmar, and Laos, it's quite limited. However, in other countries outside, we start seeing some activity. So for example, Again, I'm drawing the example from Taiwan. In the past, our counter-human trafficking law didn't really imagine the Taiwanese victims could be trafficked abroad and coming back. The imagination is more other nationalities maybe coming to Taiwan and unfortunately facing exploitation. So the law was structured that way. And therefore, when Taiwanese victims first come back to Taiwan, it was very hard for them to be identified as a victim. The identification systems was not prepared for that. However, the law changed, and afterwards it was much easier. So yes, we are seeing some examples around that, whether it's about human trafficking, whether it's about scam. Yes, like some little improvements here and there in multiple different countries, but particularly in areas that scamming compounds happening, it's still a little bit slow, and definitely that's another direction I would love to see more improvements. Thank you.
Thank you, Mina. Relatedly, what do you think are the roles of NGOs and donors to help help identify and address the issue at the grassroots level, as well as changing legislation in host nations of the compounds?
Okay, yeah, on the grassroots level. So yeah, I believe very much sometimes the informalities of our sector. So what I'm saying is. Today, if I don't know Lucy, I just know from, let's say, linking. It might not be able for us to have very good collaboration, but because we are here, we see each other, we actually know who we are, and therefore I can WhatsApp her quickly, having something, and we can jump into a call very quickly. And I understand that a lot of time, that's how things work in Asia, and actually a lot of parts of the world. So the grassroots NGO has a role that's like nobody else can replace. If another country try to sanction or try to send some pressure, it sometimes may not be even as effective as, let's say, a right stakeholder, a childhood, friend, primary school friend that's calling the kind of key government decision makers, hey, like, bro, please don't do this, it's a bit too much, and we need you to try to shift to this and that. So I am a believer that a lot of the time things are working in a way that's behind the table, and that's actually in a way that's much unseen. And that's the reason why I believe with grassroots organizations, you have a lot of a really strong advantage, because you are the one who are actually able to communicate with people who are in this region, not the people from outside sending a sanction, but you are here. So I believe that's another direction that you can try your influence in influencing decision makers. Thank you.
Thanks, Mina. You can WhatsApp me anytime. Some questions that are related to victim identification, and I know you're hosting a panel on this later this afternoon, but among workers, what percentage of those are willing participants compared to those who are trafficked? And regarding workers, how are they recruited? What are the countries of recruitment, and how are they targeted? And is there sort of a best intervention method for us to do that you know of?
Yeah. It's really hard to say the percentage, but I think this afternoon, 3:45, we will have another panel. We can ask the panelists to provide the insights and the estimation on that. But I think right now, it's still really hard for most of people to say what's the percentage of willing criminal and victim. In terms of nationalities of people who are inside, it's really global. Like, I can name like 60 plus countries, including basically almost all the Asian countries. When I say Asian, I including, for example, Central Asia, like Kyrgyzstan, for example. We also seeing people from, let's say, like African continent, East, North Africa, Latin America, a lot of Central America people being brought into scam as like models to show their faces, to talk with the potential scam victims. So we are talking about 60 plus countries, and could be even more. The list is increasing weekly, monthly. So the way they got recruited, sometimes it's through those kind of Telegram groups I mentioned, if they are willing criminal. If they are not willing criminal, sometimes it's through, for example, Facebook, linking. It could be looking at a very, very legit job. Some of a victim and survivor they described, they have actually went through 2 rounds of interview. So it just seemed like something very, very, believable. Sometimes a bit more kind of dangerous way is that we also see when the victim go into the compound, they may be placed to do scamming work, but they might also be put into the human resource team. That means they are being asked to recruit their friends. So this is a very dangerous way, because if your childhood friend call you and say, hey, like I'm having a great life in Myanmar, come and join me, like you might believe that. So we also see this kind of friendship recruitment as well. So the recruitment ways, it's multiple. Yeah. Thank you. Next
Thank
question.
you, Mina. You mentioned the $3 trillion figure, and what do you think is the accuracy of that number in your opinion?
Yeah. Like 3 trillion, I think, is one of the highest estimation now, but even the lower end, for example, the USIP report is talking about like $60 billion, and some others is also like $100 billion scale. So I think the key message is not about the number, because as we all know, for example, the 50 million victims around the world in human trafficking, this is also estimation. The idea is we are seeing a very huge issue that's out of hand and that's growing very quickly within like 2-3 years. So the accuracy of number, I think it's a bit difficult to necessarily say, but I think most of the NGOs who are working frontline nowadays might even saying that's a conservative estimation, that if we are imagining, for example, more people could be in the compound, not just in the 100,000 scale, then the amount of money they are generating could be even larger than that. So there could be, we can debate on that, but yes, there could be people believing it's even higher than that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mina. A couple questions here around prevention for this type of trafficking. You mentioned a couple options in your presentation, but do you have any examples of best practices regarding prevention or organizations that have developed really great prevention strategies?
Yeah. So in terms of prevention, I'm always very careful, because I think when it comes to prevention, the immediate thought is like, okay, how can we stop people from being trafficked? So we see, for example, police going to the airport, racing the car and saying, be careful, like don't fall into like a scam jobs. That's useful, and I believe we should continue on that. But I also think it's kind of a low-hanging fruit, and by trying to warn people to not be trafficked, we will never solve the problem. So the best way in prevention, in my view, is always trying to stop the criminal. That's the best prevention, because ultimately we are 7 billion people on the world. If I know about the issue, there will be other people who don't know, and so it's almost endless amount of people who can be potentially exploited. That's the reason why in the prevention side, I emphasize a lot about trying to stop the criminals' activities, or for example, like try to kill it when it's like still small-time operation. Like if you can stop it when it's 20 people, instead of stopping it when it's like 100 people, it's of course much easier. So for me, prevention actually linked very, very closely with prosecution. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mina. I think final question, do you have any statistics on the relationship between anti-money laundering and scamming, and how much money is fueled into scamming compounds from anti-money laundering?
Yeah, so I think statistic I don't have, but if we look at the relationship in terms of like criminal money grow, like kind of generate from scam, you understand that all of them has to go through money laundering, and the money laundering way could be multiple. A lot of them is through USDT, which is one of the cryptocurrency that stable coin linked with US dollar. Sometimes it's a money laundering transaction between USDT and the fiat money. And we are seeing those money laundering cases, for example, the largest Singaporean case, also in a kind of billion-dollar scale, and lots of reason, like a kind of money laundering cases that popping up in the region. Again, it's also millions and billions. So yeah, like I would say, I don't have a comprehensive collective statistic yet, but it could be an exercise that actually worth putting forward and trying to document through the other angle, not just through the victim testimonies, but through money laundering angle. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mina.
Thank you so much, everybody.